Imagine finding a tiny piece of everyday change, just a dime, in your pocket that suddenly feels like discovering buried treasure. You glance at it, noticing something off, something special about that little one dime you've held countless times. Today, we're peeling back the layers on three seemingly ordinary dimes: 2007, 1983, and 1996, that have quietly become rare jewels in the eyes of keen collectors. If you've ever wondered whether the coins jangling in your cup holder or hiding in your sock drawer might be worth more than their face value, you're in the right place. Let's kick things off with our first superstar, the 2007 USA 1 dime. You might think that a dime struck just 18 years ago couldn't possibly be rare, but the 2007 Roosevelt dime has a fascinating backstory. Produced at three different mints: Philadelphia, no mint mark; Denver, D, and the very small San Francisco proof facility, S. It was part of the modern clad series we see today. What makes the 2007 issue special is not the date itself, but a particular minting error that inadvertently sent a handful of clad dimes off course. Normally, clad dimes have an outer layer of copper-nickel bond over a pure copper core, giving them that familiar silvery shine. However, in very rare instances, planchets meant for other denominations or even experimental alloys ended up in the dime presses. When that happened, you'd see subtle color shifts, thickness variances, or fine lines at the rim that scream, "Something's different here." Collectors zero in on these error coins because in coin collecting, rarity is often born out of mistakes. Of the 2007 errors, the most sought after are the off-metal strikes, dimes struck on nickel or copper planchets instead of the standard clad. Auction houses have recorded sale prices ranging from a few $100s for well-worn pieces to over $1,500 for those in pristine, mint-state condition with crisp details and perfect rims. For instance, at a 2023 auction, a Denver Mint off-metal 2007 dime in MS-65 condition fetched a remarkable $1,650. That's enough to buy you a high-performance metal detector. Just kidding, but it does highlight how something you might never even notice can be a collector's dream. Now, you're probably wondering what else makes the 2007 dime stand out. Besides the off-metal oddities, there have also been a handful of double strikes and misaligned dies that create ghostly outlines around Roosevelt's profile or make the date appear slightly shifted. It's like the coin got a second chance at its portrait, and we get a peek behind the scenes of mint machinery in action. One particularly charming story involves a collector who found a 2007 dime with a laminated planchet error, where the outer copper-nickel layer peels partially away, revealing the bright copper beneath. He spotted it in pocket change at a local coffee shop. Thought it was dirt at first, but once he cleaned it, he realized he had an instant rarity worth nearly $300. Of course, condition plays a massive role in determining value. In circulated grades, where dimes bear the signs of everyday transactions, you might see values from $20 to $75 for notable errors. That's still big money compared to the 10 cents face value. But once you're dealing with mint state grades, you enter a whole new ballpark. MS-63 examples can fetch a few $100s. MS-65 jumps into the thousands, and those extremely sharp MS-67s, almost impossible to find, can sell for $3,000 or more. Even proof versions from San Francisco, which are struck specifically for collectors and often display a mirror-like finish, have seen unusual compositions slip into production. A Proof S 2007 dime showing a slight die crack or cuds, missing chunks along the rim, might bring $150 to $250 among proof aficionados. What about the story behind the die cracks and cuds? It speaks to the immense pressure and wear that minting dies endure. When a die starts to fracture, tiny hairline cracks appear in the metal surface. As the press pounds each planchet, the metal flows into these fissures, creating raised lines on the coin's face. To some collectors, these cracks map out a timeline of production runs, a sort of hidden birth certificate marking where in the minting process the coin emerged. And the cuds? They're like battle scars, chunks of the die that have broken off and transferred that break into the coin itself. Each error whispers a tale of the colossal presses running day and night to meet demand. So, what should you do if you suspect you found one of these gems? First, handle it carefully by the edges. Fingerprints can affect grade and value. Next, compare it under good light with standard 2007 Roosevelt dimes online or in a reliable coin guide. Look for mismatched fields, strange coloring, and any disruptions near the rim or date. If you're serious, consider sending it to a professional grading service like PCGS or NGC. Their certification can elevate your dime from pocket change to a major collectible. Even if it isn't a blockbuster error, you'll have the peace of mind knowing exactly what you've got. That wraps up our deep dive into the extraordinary 2007 dime. Stick around, because next we're turning back the clock to the early 1980s for a coin that, at first glance, looks as commonplace as any other, but hides its own cache of secrets. And just like that, we're transported from the modern minting halls of 2007 back to the heart of the 1980s, an era of big hair, synthesizers, and, believe it or not, one of the most surprising chapters in dime collecting. You've heard of the 1983 USA 1 dime, right? It's the coin you probably spent on gum at the corner store or fished from a vending machine. But in the eyes of savvy numismatists, the 1983 dime carries its own cachet of hidden rarities and captivating backstories. Let's rewind to 1983. The United States Mint was still running the clad composition introduced just a few years prior, bonding copper and nickel for a tough, silvery finish. At the time, rising metal costs had already forced the removal of silver from dimes back in 1965, so by 83 no one batted an eye at the standard clad dime in circulation. What came as a shock, though, were the occasional planchet mix-ups and die errors that slipped through quality control. In fact, the bulk mintages that year, over 1.3 billion dimes at Philadelphia and nearly 3 billion at Denver, made it all too easy for a rogue planchet or misaligned die to escape notice. One of the most talked about oddities is the off-center strike. Imagine a dime pressed not dead center, but shifted by 5 to 15%. Your Roosevelt profile wobbling attractively off the edge with a crescent of blank metal on the opposite side. In circulated grades, these 1983 off-center strikes can command anywhere from $50 for minor shifts up to $400 for dramatic misalignments that reveal entirely new shapes. But when you step into mint state territory, with those razor-sharp details and full luster, values climb steeply. MS-63 examples often trade around $500. MS-65 in the $1,200 to $1,800 range, and truly exceptional MS-67 specimens have pushed over $3,000 at auction. Next up, the double die variety. Though rare in dimes compared to larger denominations, the 1983 double die obverse is a holy grail for some collectors. You'll know it by that telltale doubling on Liberty, or the date, almost as if an afterimage of each letter or number hovers to the side. Only a handful of these were confirmed in the mid-1990s by certification services, and examples in top grade have sold for upwards of $2,500. One fascinating tale involves a collector who inherited a small stash of crinkled leather pouches from his grandfather, each containing a handful of 1983 dimes. Among them, he discovered a double die so sharp that In God We Trust looked like it was etched twice in rapid succession. He sent it in blind to a grading service, and when it came back as MS-66, he found himself in the spotlight at the next major coin show, fetching over $3,200 from a dealer who'd been chasing that die variety for years. But the intrigue doesn't stop there. The 1983 dime also boasts a subset of repunched mint marks, especially from Denver. Back then, mint workers sometimes had to manually realign mint mark punches on the die, and slight shifts created overlapping ghostly echoes you can spot under 5 times magnification. These repunched D-dimes aren't always eye-catching at first glance, but when you reveal that layered mint mark, you're holding a curious relic of the mint's artisan process. In circulated grades, they range from $30 to $100, while crisp mint state examples can fetch $200 to $600. For those of you who chase the unexpected, laminated planchet errors in 1983 dimes, are another sweet spot. A blister or peel in the bonded layer reveals that bright copper core peeking through, a pop of color that stands out in any collection. And when you're dealing with mint state pieces, a perfectly centered, mirror sheen proof 1983 S-dime with a tiny lamination bubble can bring $300 to $500 because proof coins tend to show these defects more beautifully than their business strike counterparts. Naturally, condition is everything. In circulated grades, think VF20 to XF45. You're likely looking at values between $10 and $50 for most common error types. But once you step into the uncirculated realm, the premium becomes substantial. MS60 to MS62 grades might trade for $75 to $250 depending on the specific error, while MS63 and above start to break four-figure barriers for the most eye-catching examples. And let's not forget the proof lovers. A flawless 1983, S-dime and PR70, where every detail glistens without a single mark, could be the centerpiece of a modern proof set, pushing well into the thousands if it surfaces at auction. Up next, we'll leap forward to the 1996 dime, where a fresh wave of modern errors and minting quirks promise even more surprises. Stay tuned. There's plenty more treasure to unearth. And now, let's fast forward to 1996, a year when technology was booming, grunge rock was still echoing on the radio, and the humble Roosevelt dime was quietly accumulating its own hidden treasures. At first glance, the 1996 dime seems like just another modern coin in your change jar. But look closely, and you'll discover a fascinating array of errors and varieties that make this issue a must-have for serious collectors. Back in 1996, the U.S. Mint struck dimes at Philadelphia, no mint mark, Denver, D, and San Francisco, S for proofs. The clad composition we've come to know, copper cores sandwiched between copper nickel, was the standard, but production glitches still happened. One of the most sought-after oddities from that year is the off-metal strike. Occasionally, planchets intended for nickels or even pennies wound up in the dime presses. When a dime is struck on a pure copper planchet, it gleams with a warm, reddish hue that's impossible to miss once you know what to look for. In circulated grades, such examples often sell for $100 to $250, depending on how dramatic the color contrast is. But in mint state, say MS63 or higher, you could see bids well into $1,000 or more. One copper planchet dime, graded MS64, recently brought $1,200 at auction, a testament to how a simple planchet swap can vault a dime's value skyward. Another prized error is the broad strike. Normally, a dime passes through collar jaws that impart the rim and keep metal contained. If the collar fails or isn't seated correctly, the coin spreads wider, flattening the rim and giving the design a slightly melted look. Broad strikes from 1996 can command $50 in lower grades, but a sharp MS65 broad strike with full detail might fetch $800 to $1,100. These coins showcase the raw power of the mint's presses, where a tiny mechanical hiccup can produce a remarkably dramatic result. Then there's the clipped planchet. If a blank planchet isn't perfectly cut, it can emerge missing a segment, ranging from a small crescent to a larger bite that takes a chunk out of Roosevelt's shoulder. Clipped dimes from 1996 are relatively scarce, and their value depends on the size and shape of the clip. A small, regular clip might be worth $30 to $75 in circulated condition, while a large, irregular clip on an MS63 example could climb past $500. One collector shared how he found a 1996 D dime with a huge boomerang clip protruding into the field. Once graded, it sold privately for $600 to $50. Beyond these planchet-based errors, there are die-related varieties to chase. The double die obverse DDO for 1996 Philadelphia issues is subtle but detectable under magnification, Liberty, and the dates show faint doubling, like a ghostly echo. Only a handful have been authenticated, making them highly desirable. In XF45 grades, you might see values around $150, but an MS65 DDO can push $1,500 to $2,000 when it surfaces at major auction. Remember, the trick is spotting that slight shift in lettering. It's a rewarding find if you know where to look. Die cracks and cuds also appear in the 1996 series. When a die starts to fracture, it leaves raised hairlines across the coin's surface. Look for fine, splotchy lines near the date or rim. Collectors love these because they illustrate the die's life story. A prominent die crack on a 1996 S-proof dime running from Roosevelt's neck into the fields has fetched $200 to $300, and that's before we consider a proof's typical premium. If you got full band luster and pristine mirror fields, that crack becomes even more valuable. Repunched mint marks, RPMs, are another niche but captivating variety. On Denver's mint-marked dimes, attentive eyes can spot a second, fainter D behind the main mark, an artifact of manually repositioned punches. RPMs in circulated grades usually trade for $40 to $100, but a clean MS64 RPM can be worth $300 or more, especially to a collector who's building a repunched mint mark set. Proof errors round out the picture. The 1996 S-dime was struck as part of the proof set with a brilliant mirror finish and frosted devices. Yet, even proofs aren't immune to mistakes. Flat spot errors, where the dies have minor gouges, can leave smooth patches on the coin surface. These proof flat spots, while subtle, make a dime stand out in a display and often sell for $100 to $200. Better still are proof double dies, where one dime on the reverse shows slight duplication. Those can approach $400 to $500 if the doubling is strong and the fields are flawless. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive into 3 outstanding Roosevelt dimes, the modern marvels of 2007, the nostalgic treasures of 1983, and the turn-of-the-millennium surprises of 1996, you can see how it seemed like everyday coins can become prize collectibles. From off-metal strikes to double dies, each error tells a story of mint machinery, human oversight, and serendipity. So next time you empty your pockets, take a moment to study every dime. You never know when you might hold a small piece of numismatic history worth far more than its 10-cent face value. Happy hunting, and may your next find be your most exciting yet.